Imagine waking up one morning. You open the window, but something is wrong. The air is cold. Not normal morning cold. A deeper cold. The kind of cold that feels like it belongs to another season. You look up at the sky. The sun is there, but it has no real light. It looks pale. Weak, like the moon behind a thick layer of smoke. Days pass, then weeks. Summer arrives, but the warmth never comes. Crops stop growing, harvests fail, food becomes scarce, and no one knows why. There is no internet. No satellites, no weather forecast, no scientist on television saying, "Do not worry, it is only volcanic dust." For the people living through it, it may have felt like the world was ending. This is the story of the year 536, a year many researchers describe as one of the worst times to be alive in large parts of the world. But did the sun really go dark? What could change the climate across continents? And how could one natural disaster lead to hunger, disease, war, and the collapse of societies? This is not just the story of one year. It is the story of a moment when humanity learned something terrifying. You do not always need a war to destroy a civilization. Sometimes all it takes is for the sky to give a little less light. To understand this disaster, we need to go back in time. The year is 536 AD. The Western Roman Empire had already fallen, but in the East, the Byzantine Empire was still powerful. Its capital was Constantinople. Its emperor was Justinian. He dreamed of restoring the glory of Rome. Across Europe, new kingdoms were rising. In the Middle East, powerful empires competed for land and influence. In China, dynasties faced war, political change, and unrest. But beneath all this power, there was something more important than armies: food. People depended on wheat, barley, rice, fruit. A good harvest meant survival. A bad harvest meant hunger. And several bad harvests in a row could mean disaster. Today, if crops fail in one region, food can sometimes be shipped from another continent. But in the 6th century, most people depended on the land near their homes, their village, their fields, their local harvest. And then, the sky changed. Ancient writers recorded something strange. They wrote that the sun lost its brightness. For months, it looked weak and pale, not like the strong sun that lights up the middle of a day. More like the moon, a dim light behind a curtain of smoke. One famous historian from that time, Procopius, wrote that the sun gave light without brightness. He said it looked like the moon. This was not just poetry. Reports from Europe and Asia describe unusual cold summers, failed harvests, and famine. In parts of China, records describe snow and frost at unusual times of the year. In parts of Europe, crops struggled to grow. And for farming communities, this was more frightening than war. Because the land was no longer producing enough food. But what could make the sun look so weak? For centuries, no one knew. Some people believed it was a comet. Others believed it was a strange weather event. For many, it looked like a sign from heaven. But the real answer was hidden far away, deep inside ancient ice. In Greenland and Antarctica, scientists drilled deep into old ice. These ice cores are more than frozen water. They are records of Earth's past. Each layer of ice is like a page in a history book. When a huge volcano erupts, it can send ash and sulfur gases high into the atmosphere. Some of those particles eventually fall onto snow and ice. Then more snow falls over them. Year after year, the particles become trapped inside the ice.
So when scientists drill down through the ice, they can find evidence of ancient volcanic eruptions.
And that is exactly what they found. In ice layers linked to the year 536, scientists found signs of a major volcanic event. Then, only a few years later, they found signs of more large eruptions. This means the world may not have been hit by just one disaster. It may have been hit again and again.
Now imagine a volcano exploding, not just lava flowing down a mountain, a massive eruption, one powerful enough to send gas and tiny particles high into the sky. Some of these particles can reach the stratosphere. That is a high layer of the atmosphere, higher than normal clouds. Up there, sulfur particles can spread around the planet. They act like a thin mirror. They reflect some sunlight back into space. Less sunlight reaches the ground. Temperatures fall. Summers become colder. Growing seasons become shorter, and crops begin to fail. A farm does not need to be buried under snow to be destroyed. Sometimes it only needs a few weeks without enough warmth. Sometimes rain comes at the wrong time. Sometimes the sun becomes too weak for plants to grow normally. And in the year 536, that may be exactly what happened. There is another clue. Trees. Every year, a tree grows a new ring. In a good year, the ring is wider. In a cold or dry year, the ring is thinner. When scientists studied ancient trees, they found signs of poor growth around this same period. The ice, the trees, and the written records all pointed to the same story. The sky became darker, the world became colder, and people were not prepared. But dark skies were only the beginning. When crops fail, the first victim is not only the farmer. The whole society suffers. Bread becomes expensive. Food stores run low. Families begin to move. Cities become crowded. Fear spreads. Governments need more food, but there is less food to find. Small problems become larger. Villages may fight over water. Cities may close their gates to hungry people. Governments may raise taxes to support armies and protect food supplies. And people who are already poor, sick, or affected by war become even more vulnerable. This is important. We cannot say that every crisis in the 6th century was caused by a volcano. History is never that simple. There were wars, political conflicts, disease, poverty, and inequality. But a climate disaster can push a weak society closer to collapse. Imagine an old building with cracks in its walls. Then an earthquake hits. The earthquake did not create every crack, but it may be the final blow. The eruptions may not have created every problem, but they may have made many problems much worse. And then, before people had time to recover, another blow arrived. Around the year 540, evidence suggests another major volcanic eruption. The first crisis was not over, and now the world faced another shock. Sunlight may have weakened again. Cold conditions continued. Food supplies came under even more pressure. Some researchers connect this period to a longer cold phase in parts of the northern hemisphere. A period sometimes called the Late Antique Little Ice Age. But another disaster was coming. The year was 541, and in the ports of the Mediterranean, a deadly disease appeared. The Plague of Justinian. The plague spread quickly. It traveled through trade routes. It reached cities. It reached Constantinople. It reached the heart of the Byzantine Empire. Today, scientists connect this plague to a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium that would later cause the Black Death in Europe. People became sick. They developed fever. Their bodies weakened. Painful swellings appeared.
And many died. In large cities, so many people died that burying the bodies became a crisis of its own. Now imagine living in a society already damaged by cold weather and food shortages. And then a deadly epidemic arrives. Did the volcanic eruptions cause the plague? No, that would not be accurate. The plague had its own biological cause: bacteria.
Animals that carried the disease, trade routes, crowded cities. All of these things mattered. But climate stress and hunger may have made societies more vulnerable. When people are hungry, their bodies become weaker. When people move in search of food, diseases can spread more easily. When governments are overwhelmed, they have fewer resources to help. That is what makes disasters so dangerous. They rarely arrive alone. Cold can lead to hunger. Hunger can lead to migration. Migration can lead to conflict. And in the middle of it all, disease finds a way in. The year 536 may not have been just one terrible year. It may have been the first domino in a much larger chain of disasters. Now ask yourself this: what if something similar happened today? Would we be ready? In some ways, yes. We have satellites. We can see volcanic eruptions from space. We can measure particles in the atmosphere. Countries can share information. Food can travel across oceans. But in other ways, the modern world is deeply fragile. We depend on transportation, fuel, global trade, fertilizers, electricity, the internet, and complex supply chains. If major crop regions suffered for several years in a row, the effects would not stay in one country. Food prices would rise, markets could become unstable, migration could increase, competition for resources could become more intense. Technology has made us stronger, but it has also made us more dependent. And maybe that is the biggest lesson of the year 536. Civilization is not as solid as it looks. We are used to the sun. We are used to the seasons. We expect spring to feel like spring, and summer to feel like summer. But Earth does not always follow our plans. A volcano in a distant part of the world can affect food thousands of kilometers away. An invisible layer of particles in the sky can change economies, politics, and human health. And the people of 536 may never have understood exactly what happened to them. They only knew that the sun was no longer the same. They saw their crops fail. They watched the world become colder and darker. But today, science allows us to rebuild part of their story. From a tree ring, from a trace of sulfur trapped in ice, from a sentence written more than 1,500 years ago. And maybe that is the strangest part of history. Sometimes, to understand the greatest disasters, we have to look at the smallest clues. A thin ring inside a tree, a tiny layer of ash in ice, and a sun that for a long time seemed to have forgotten how to shine. The year 536 was not the end of the world, but for millions of people, it may have felt like the beginning of the end. And one question remains. What if tomorrow morning we wake up and the sun is still there, but it no longer shines the way it used to? How ready would we really be? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more true stories about the moments when nature changed human history. Until next time, look up at the sky. It may control more of our future than we think.